At only 22 years old, Danny faces ridicule for driving the deteriorating truck his deceased father left behind, receiving constant humiliation from veteran truckers wherever he goes. However, his world transforms when an enigmatic wealthy businessman enters his world. Can Danny succeed in preserving his father's memory, or will the burden of history overwhelm him? The evening atmosphere was saturated with diesel fumes and coffee aromas while Danny Parker rested against his father's vehicle, a Peterbilt 359 from 1986. What was once vibrant red paint had become pale and covered in corrosion. The metal accents had lost their shine. The front lights appeared cloudy. The vehicle had experienced better times. Yet for Danny, this wasn't merely transportation, it represented his father's possession. Being 22 made Danny appear inexperienced among professional truckers. His limbs were lean. Youth still showed in his facial features, and his palms, despite having calluses, lacked the toughened resilience of someone with many years of cargo hauling experience. Whenever he entered the operator's seat, he envisioned his father sitting alongside him, the individual who sacrificed his existence attempting to stop a catastrophic highway accident 2 years prior. However, the highway showed no sentimentality. During that afternoon at the cargo dock, he caught the sound of mockery. A pair of weathered drivers with protruding bellies beneath their stained shirts made open jokes while observing him reverse the worn Peterbilt. One driver mocked him while igniting a cigarette, suggesting the ancient vehicle might fall apart from a harsh glance. The second driver laughed, questioning whether his father had also bequeathed him infant diapers. Danny maintained a forced grin while completing the parking maneuver, acting as though he hadn't heard their comments. Internally, his chest constricted with emotion. These men were ignorant. They remained unaware of the countless evenings he'd crawled beneath the vehicle, repairing fluid leaks with adhesive tape, swapping electrical components by portable light, or working through mechanical problems armed only with a deteriorating instruction book and pure resolve. Presently, within the faint illumination of the roadside restaurant, Danny occupied a solitary booth with torn vinyl, prodding at a dish of cooled French fries. He observed the other drivers, their boisterous laughter, friendly backslapping, and highway tail exchanges. He yearned to belong among them, to gain their approval, yet every look directed his way appeared tinged with mockery or sympathy. Then the tipping point arrived. From an adjacent table, someone spoke loud enough for everyone to hear, remarking on the scrapyard vehicle that had arrived earlier, claiming it expelled more exhaust than someone's grandfather's memorial service. The resulting laughter came swiftly and cutting, like an unexpected blow to the stomach. Danny clutched his utensil so firmly his finger joints turned pale. He pushed himself away from the table, the seat scraping loudly across the flooring. His pulse raced as he rushed outside into the darkness, inhaling the frigid air as if it might cool his flushed face. Perhaps their assessment is accurate, he thought with darkness and resentment. Perhaps he was merely a youth pretending to be his father. Perhaps he was pulling both this vehicle and himself toward destruction. He dragged his fingers through his light-colored hair, frustration stinging behind his eyelids. The Peterbilt towered in the shadows, its outline rough and damaged beneath the unsteady parking area illumination. Danny kicked at a pebble, watching it bounce across the asphalt. He failed to detect the silhouette leaning against the restaurant's distant wall, partially concealed in darkness. An elderly gentleman, impeccably attired yet with a time-worn face, silently observed the young driver. His silvery eyes mellowed with something resembling acknowledgement or perhaps remorse as he watched the young man's rigid posture and the deteriorating vehicle behind him. Danny released a heavy sigh, pressing his brow against the chilled metal of the truck entrance. "What purpose does this serve, Dad?" he murmured. "Does driving this deteriorating machine down the interstate while everyone ridicules me truly honor your memory?" Behind his position, the silent witness ignited a tobacco roll, the small flame briefly flickering before vanishing into the evening. He inhaled slowly, releasing smoke contemplatively, his gaze remaining on Danny. This wasn't Walter Sinclair's first encounter with that vehicle. In earlier times, before accumulating wealth and conducting boardroom meetings, Walter had occupied that identical cabin alongside someone he considered his dearest companion. Now, observing the young man standing diminutive yet resolute against the burden of his father's remembrance. Something awakened deep within Walter's being. Danny remained oblivious that this evening would initiate everything's transformation. The small stones made sounds beneath expensive Italian footwear as Walter crossed the poorly illuminated truck plaza. His fitted dark blue overcoat contrasted sharply with the oil-stained denim and work footwear surrounding him. Yet Walter moved with the relaxed assurance of someone who'd ceased worrying about appearing misplaced long ago. Danny, still positioned against the truck entrance, jumped slightly upon hearing the voice from behind. That vehicle. Walter's tone was subdued and contemplative. I believed I'd never encounter her again. Danny rotated, scowling at the impeccably dressed unfamiliar person. Am I acquainted with you? Walter produced a modest, nearly nostalgic expression. No, young man. However, I was acquainted with your father. Danny's respiration halted momentarily in his windpipe. He straightened his posture, examining the gentleman cautiously. You knew my dad? How? Walter advanced closer, directing his attention upward at the damaged Peterbilt. Many years passed. I possessed nothing. Simply an impoverished youth attempting to traverse the nation. Your father provided me transportation when nobody else demonstrated willingness. I traveled with him for multiple weeks. He imparted more knowledge about determination, integrity, and diligent effort than any educational institution for commerce ever accomplished. Danny's doubt flickered in his expression. Certainly, he reasoned, another individual with a tale about Dad. However, something regarding this gentleman's manner of speaking, the genuine, unrefined sentiment beneath the precisely controlled language, caused him to hesitate. Walter proceeded, removing his hand coverings and placing them into his coat compartment. I'm indebted to him beyond what I can articulate. When I observed you present tonight, when I observed this vehicle, his tone mellowed. I comprehended perhaps the moment has arrived to settle that obligation. Danny folded his limbs, experiencing the burden of weariness and doubt. What precisely are you proposing? Walter smiled, the pointed gleam of a commerce professional returning to his expression. A test of ability, he indicated extensively toward the vehicle. Reconstruct this machine. Return her to her former state, what she represented. I'll finance the expenditure, components, craftsmanship, whatever necessity arises. However, there exists one stipulation. Danny elevated an eyebrow. Which is? You record the expedition, every phase, the reconstructions, the obstacles, the victories. Throughout, you distribute the teachings your father imparted to you, the variety of knowledge the world dismisses too hastily. Danny released a brief, harsh laugh. You desire me to produce some variety of trucking broadcast program? Walter's expression mellowed. Not a program, young man. A narrative. Individuals require narratives presently. Truthful ones. Danny wavered, his pulse accelerating. One portion of him resisted the concept. Wasn't this compromising principles? Converting his father's remembrance into digital material for attention and distribution. Yet another portion, the segment that recalled extended evenings beside the vehicle, conversing with the vacant cabin as though his father remained present, experienced a spark of curiosity. What advantage exists for you? Danny inquired softly. Walter's expression vanished, and momentarily the refined exterior fractured. Something fatigued appeared in his expression. Something solitary. I believe I desire to recall who I formerly was, Walter articulated gently. Or perhaps I'm anticipating you'll revive my memory. The two gentlemen remained there, the evening enveloping them, the restaurant sounds diminishing into the distance. Danny experienced the aged vehicle behind his position, the burden of his father's remembrance pressing against his spine. Could he genuinely undertake this? Did he possess the desire? Acceptable, Danny stated gradually. I'll proceed with it. Walter's expression returned, expansive, authentic, and somewhat relieved. During the subsequent days, the endeavor gained massive digital attention. Walter's communications personnel constructed a polished declaration. The legacy rebuild, the narrative of a youth restoring his father's vehicle, directed by historical knowledge and financed by one of the logistics industry's most prominent figures. Initially, the reaction proved overwhelmingly favorable. Thousands of individuals supported Danny, inundating his recently established digital media pages with motivation. They appreciated the concept of a determined underdog preserving his father's remembrance. However, shortly the opposition emerged. One commentator wrote that this youth was merely exploiting his deceased father. Another mocked it as simply another digital personality endeavor masked as commemoration. Someone sneered that he was disrespecting his father's modest existence by collaborating with an extremely wealthy individual. Danny examined the remarks during late evening hours, positioned on the slim bed in his vehicle's sleeping compartment. His chest constricted with each criticism. Am I? He questioned himself. Am I compromising my principles? Meanwhile, Walter observed the controversy develop from his elevated office suite, fingers clasped beneath his jaw. His counselors encouraged him to allow the endeavor to progress naturally, to appreciate the favorable publicity. However, Walter experienced something more profound emerging. This wasn't merely regarding the vehicle or the youth. It concerned confronting the aspects of himself he'd concealed long previously, the errors, the disloyalties, the companions abandoned during his ascent to achievement. While Danny rotated a mechanical tool beneath the vehicle's engine compartment, lubricant spreading across his palms, he possessed no awareness of how interconnected his expedition was becoming with the gentleman who'd emerged from obscurity to challenge him. Neither of them comprehended how extensively they were going to transform one another. The metallic collision resonated throughout the aged repair facility as Danny struck the mechanical tool onto the work surface, exasperation tightening his jaw muscles. His palms were abraded from countless hours of removing corrosion and manipulating fasteners that resisted movement. The vehicle, his father's vehicle, occupied the service area partially disassembled, resembling a scrap collection more than the distinguished machine it previously was. Listen, youth. I communicated to you this isn't valuable. Mick, the experienced chief technician, cleaned his palms on a cloth, moving his head negatively. You're investing substantial resources after inadequate returns. Simply release her. Danny positioned his shoulders firmly. Negative. I'm reconstructing it. Mick produced a cynical chuckle. Persistent, identical to your elderly gentleman. However, even he comprehended when to surrender. The language caused pain. Danny swallowed with difficulty and returned toward the vehicle, blinking away the burning sensation behind his eyelids. Negative, he communicated to himself. I'm not surrendering. However, the obstacles accumulated. The components vendor elevated their costs midway through the purchase. The news media, informed by Walter's personnel, lingered at the periphery of every facility visit, image-capturing devices clicking, anxious for conflict. Then Emma appeared. She materialized unexpectedly one precipitation-filled afternoon. Limbs folded, mouth rigid, expression intense with aged resentment. I observed you on the broadcast, she stated without emotion, positioned beneath the moisture-dripping covering. You're a prominent figure presently? Danny became motionless, lubricant smeared across his facial area, and produced a feeble expression. Greetings, Em. She didn't reciprocate the expression. Emma, 3 years his senior, had consistently been the pragmatic sibling. Where Danny clung to their father's remembrance, Emma had departed years previously, exhausted from anticipating, from observing their dad's sacrifice everything for the highway. I don't comprehend it, Danny, she articulated softly, advancing closer. What motivates you to do this? That vehicle, it destroyed him. It removed him from our lives. Danny's chest constricted. Negative, Em. He rescued individuals. That massive collision. He extracted drivers before. His tone fractured. Before he didn't survive. Emma's expression mellowed, yet only momentarily. And where were we? Correct? Occupying the residence anticipating. Anticipating a father who cherished that vehicle more than he cherished existing with us. The language struck like physical contact. Danny rotated away, compressing the interior of his facial tissue. That evening, occupying solitude in the facility, Danny examined the expanding volume of digital remarks. Some individuals were supporting him, yet others, harsher voices, criticized him of pursuing prominence, of utilizing his father's demise as advancement. He propelled his communication device onto the work surface and concealed his head in his palms. Am I proceeding correctly? The subsequent day, Walter materialized. He remained silently for a duration, observing Danny struggle with a resistant axle component. Then softly he articulated, I never communicated the complete narrative to you, correct? Danny eliminated perspiration from his forehead, pulse accelerating. Walter occupied a position on an inverted container, positioning his arm joints on his leg joints. Your father and I, we weren't merely companions on the highway. We were collaborators. We possessed intentions to construct something collectively. A logistics enterprise, modest initially, simply the two of us. However, I developed aspiration. When the financial supporters arrived with proposals, I accepted the proposition and abandoned him. I communicated to myself it was merely commerce, yet I betrayed him. Danny's palms intensified on the mechanical tool. I constructed my commercial domain on transactions we conceived collectively. Walter proceeded, his tone burdensome. And your father? He remained exterior there on the highway where he consistently was. I attempted to rectify it subsequently. Proposed to him a financial participation, a portion of the enterprise, yet he declined. He articulated he didn't desire to participate in something constructed on fractured commitments. Danny's pulse thundered in his chest cavity. He experienced as though the flooring had been extracted from beneath his position. His father, the gentleman he admired, had experienced injustice. Affirmative, yet he had also persistently declined reconciliation, perhaps at the expenditure of their family's prospects. What motivates you to communicate this to me presently? Danny murmured. Walter directed his vision at him without deviation. Because you merit comprehension, and because reconstructing this vehicle isn't merely regarding preserving your father's memory. It's regarding confronting both our histories. That evening, Danny and Emma occupied positions on the vehicle's posterior, lower limbs suspended, directing attention at the celestial bodies. She positioned her cranium on his upper limb joint, and they occupied positions silently without hostility between them. I continue to fail to comprehend your motivation for doing this, Emma murmured. Danny released respiration, his exhalation creating mist in the chilled evening. Because it's not merely regarding the vehicle. It's regarding completing what he couldn't accomplish. Regarding demonstrating, I'm uncertain, demonstrating that history doesn't have to possess us. Emma remained silent for an extended interval. Then she extended over, compressed his palm, and murmured, acceptable. Then let's complete it collectively. As the evening extended forward, Danny experienced something transform internally. Within himself, within his family, within the aged, damaged vehicle anticipating its secondary existence. The highway ahead wasn't transparent, and the burden of history remained burdensome on his upper limb joints. Yet he possessed confidence he could transport it. The morning illumination extended across the atmosphere in elongated, gentle strokes of golden and rose coloring, reflecting off the refined metal of the vehicle. Danny moved his palm over the forward covering, experiencing the chilled, flawless surface beneath his hand's interior. A substantial contrast from the corroded, damaged metal it had been merely weeks previously. The machine gleamed, every detail meticulously restored. However, it wasn't exclusively the vehicle that had experienced transformation. Danny himself maintained elevated posture presently, more stable. Although a trace of anxious vitality flickered in his chest cavity, he positioned his communication device on a three-legged support, the crimson recording illumination blinking gently. He inhaled deeply, directing his attention into the optical device. Greetings, everyone. He commenced, his tone somewhat coarse yet truthful. This is the moment. He directed his attention backward at the vehicle, producing a faint expression. When I initiated this endeavor, I believed it was merely regarding reconstructing a machine, returning a fragment of my dad's remembrance. However, throughout the process, I comprehended it was more substantial than that. I was reconstructing something in myself simultaneously. His tone caught somewhat, I acquired knowledge that sorrow doesn't vanish merely because you're occupied. You can propel yourself into labor, into disturbance, into anything genuinely, yet the quietness anticipates. In that quietness, you must confront the elements you've been evading. I evaded my family, from the suffering of losing my dad, from the reality regarding how complicated he was. However, this vehicle, this expedition, compelled me to cease evading. Danny inhaled respiration, directing attention downward, then returning upward. To everyone who observed, who assisted me, gratitude. You didn't merely assist me reconstruct a vehicle. You assisted me discover my path returning to myself. He produced an expression, modest yet authentic, and extended over to terminate the recording. Subsequently that day, Walter materialized. The two gentlemen remained in the facility, the atmosphere tense yet tranquil, like a tempest had concluded and abandoned only moist ground behind. Walter eliminated obstruction from his respiratory passage. I possess something for you. He transferred over a substantial paper container. Danny accessed it cautiously, visual organs examining the documentation interior. It was a logistics agreement, a profitable one that would transform Danny's modest operation into a component of Walter's commercial domain. I desire you participating, Walter articulated softly. You possess the motivation, the courage, the emotional center. You're precisely the variety of individual I require, and it's the minimum I can accomplish to rectify circumstances. Danny's digestive organ twisted. This represented everything he'd envisioned, an opportunity to expand, to construct something genuine. However, it simultaneously signified advancing into the obscurity of the gentleman who had betrayed his father. That evening, he occupied a position at the culinary preparation surface with Emma, the agreement distributed between them. She consumed her heated beverage gradually, observing him over the container's periphery. So? She inquired gently. I'm uncertain, Danny murmured. It experiences like if I articulate affirmative. I'm rotating my spine on Dad, like I'm eliminating everything he represented. Emma positioned down her container. Or perhaps you're reformulating it. Danny produced a puzzled expression. She positioned forward. Danny, you can't exist your existence transporting his resentments. You don't have to pardon Walter for what he accomplished. However, you simultaneously don't have to restrict yourself to history merely to demonstrate you're faithful. Danny massaged his palms over his facial area. What if I'm not prepared? Emma produced an expression gently. You'll never be prepared. You simply determined to advance regardless. The subsequent morning, Danny encountered Walter adjacent to the vehicle, the solar body ascending behind their positions. I'll accept, Danny articulated softly. However, not as your subordinate, as a collaborator. On my stipulations. Walter's facial hair elevated somewhat, astonishment flickering across his facial area before he gestured acknowledgement. Equitable sufficiently. They connected palms in agreement. Just like that, a connection that had been fractured for multiple decades was secured returning collectively. Not eliminated, yet reconstructed. Danny ascended into the operator's position of the vehicle, the propulsion system producing vibration to existence beneath him. Emma remained positioned off to the lateral area, limbs folded, yet producing an expression gently. Mick produced a modest gesture from the service entrance. Walter observed silently, palms in his compartments, a contemplative expression on his facial area. Danny rotated downward the transparent opening, producing a wide expression. I'll return. Emma produced laughter. You improved. With a profound respiration, Danny facilitated the machine forward, the solar body cutting across the metal, the highway extending outward in frontal position of him like a commitment. He wasn't evading from history presently. He was operating forward toward a prospect he was finally prepared to form with his personal palms. As the vehicle disappeared down the interstate, the visual display diminished to obscurity, abandoning exclusively the illumination of the celestial boundary and the silent vibration of possibility. This narrative revives our memory that preserving history isn't regarding existing in it. It's regarding transporting its teachings forward. What would your actions be if you discovered painful realities regarding your personal family's remembrance? Communicate to us in the remarks. We're substantially proximate to 1,000 followers. With your assistance, we can achieve this achievement collectively. We would value your participation. Accept the expedition for more influential narratives like this. Encounter you in the subsequent visual presentation.